Imagine, enslaved by an oppressive regime, with all the people in your family, in your community, all of the people who you love and know, whipped and beaten. Sandals worn down to the heel, dirty, smelly. Your feet blistered and bruised, bleeding and worn to the bone. Your back and legs baking in the heat, your body sweating from sunrise to sunset. Working ceaselessly from the age you can walk to the time of your death. Year after year, sowing, harvesting, sowing, harvesting. Only to end each day never taking in the smell of the sweet bread of the grains that you have grown, or taste the sweet juices of the melons that you had grown either. Angry, beaten down, tired. Each day is a test of faith to the greatest degree. God, why? Why must we suffer? Why do the sins of the rage of one man, this Pharaoh, have to leave us feeling so exhausted and profoundly weak and hungry? Where are you? Where are you? Imagine those Israelites in those days, thirsting, dreaming, and yearning for the day their God acts in their favor. The Almighty God who intercedes, makes the world just, punishes the afflictors, and releases the captives, guiding them to the land of milk and honey. Then and only then we shall rejoice in knowing that at the end of the day our steadfastness will be rewarded. Well, unfortunately, maybe so, time and time again, and not in the least bit in this part of the story, God tends to go, if I may add my opinion, a little overboard on the whole lesson thing. It all starts with the prophet and his speaker, Aaron and Moses. After a deliberate commandment to the Pharaoh, several commandments actually, that big and powerful God gives us many, us too, many chances to change our ways, and apparently swarms of frogs and locusts and all the other ridiculous signs from above weren't enough to make the Pharaoh budge or see the bigger picture. Odd. But now, that's all besides the point, right? The people of God endure it. They suffer alongside the Pharaoh and his army. Coincidentally, though, yet somehow they survive in those hardships with the Pharaoh's army. Resting and knowing, even though the tactics may not be the most favorable, thanks a lot, God, at least their God was working on their behalf. At least God was doing something. Now, the thing is, in retrospect, being a people who have more than likely heard this story a few times, we know what ultimately happens. Although God's actions, granted, seem to be very bizarre and mysterious to us, at least me, even today, we see that there is a powerful message of resilience when one has faith. Solidarity during times of great adversity. Unity in the face of great discord and weakness. And even in the text we read for today, we've seen that the good old God comes through and provides manna just when the Israelites are starving. And really starting to wonder why they were in this mess in the whole first place once again. I don't want to underrate the resilience of the Israelites. Truly, their faith in God, the one who works in mysterious ways, was unparalleled. We see this faith come across many, many different times. It's tested and then proven, tested and proven. to live each day wondering what is going to happen to you, hoping each day your faith will see you through the hardships. Well, that's not easy. I wonder who those people are today. I want to put on the shelf this idea that as most modern Christians, we get to just read through this text removed from the scene. Those people struggled. Those people didn't have a walk in the park. In spite of their struggle, they got what they needed. God does what needs to be done when it's all said and done, right? The world ends up recalibrating eventually. All's well that ends well, right? We get it. But I do want to settle in for a minute on the people's grumblings to Moses. They're tired, angry, sick, and some of them are probably dying, even in the Exodus, just to find that their God has taken them into the wilderness because their lives weren't wild enough. Now they are walking where the wild things are. Dangers lurking around every corner. Dry sands, miles and miles of nothingness. I don't know if you've ever been out west a little bit farther. It feels like that a little bit. I'm from Oregon. There's a lot of corn out there. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the wilderness. Snakes. A lot of mirages of hope, wondering what's on the horizon. The past is just a memory of glim hopelessness. We'll get to the positive stuff in a minute, I promise. And we find ourselves today stuck in that same wretched predicament. I promise there's something good coming. I thought God was doing something here. We thought, God, that you were going to bring us out of that place. An exodus from the regimes of humanity. Greed, power, selfishness. Wonder who needs an exodus from the same acts of aggression that prevail in our world even today. Where is God for those people? And then the climax of their lament, the Israelites say something that still sends shivers up my bones as I hear it even today. If only we had died by the hand of God. If only we had died by the hand of God. Commentators liken this phrase to others similar in the Hebrew Bible to mean something like, if only we had been allowed to die by natural causes. They presume those natural causes being referred to are swarms of locusts and frogs and all of those other crazy natural disasters. If only we had died in those. Why didn't you just kill us? Why are you letting us suffer still? It's infectious doubt, losing sight of the road ahead. One of the problems whenever this text comes up in the lectionary for Sunday is that lots of modern Christians who read this small piece of text out of context for a nice little chunket of Sunday lesson is that they kind of forget these things don't really get better right afterward, right? There are many more trials and tests of faith, like a lot. Kind of like from Jesus onward. The problem is that most preachers want to skirt over that stuff. Terry's not one of those people, don't tell her. I hear her speak a lot, she's a wonderful woman. It doesn't really seal the deal of God's steadfastness very nicely. It causes, if I may so boldly say, a little more doubt. Perhaps in ourselves and in our faith than answers. What happens when ambiguity keeps us at night awake rather than sweet dreams of milk and honey? God, we've walked this far by faith. Now what? What are our options anyway? Stay with that? Or move forward and have no idea what the heck's going to happen next? I like to call it the, gee, thanks a lot prayer. It's usually the prayer that I'm swearing to myself, more than kneeling with my eyes closed and a nice pose with a smile on my face. You probably know the prayer. Yeah, it's gee, thanks a lot. Now what? I wonder when you've ever had a prayer like this. When you know that what you need and you know what you want are two totally different things. But you know that what you need is what you need. And once you realize that God isn't Santa Claus, you're probably going to end up getting what you need, which most certainly is not what you want. This summer I was a chaplain intern at a hospital in Normal, Illinois. It's a part of a program known as CPE. For those of you not familiar with that, it stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. CPE is typically, especially in the disciples tradition, a requirement for ordination candidates. I'm an ordination candidate for the disciples. And so I thought, what the heck, we'll go ahead and go on this very good training. CPE is kind of a bad word in the seminary world. Let me tell you why. When I first posted my status on Facebook that said, yay, I got accepted to CPE, it's exciting, one of my friends who's not familiar with it said, what exactly is CPE? I commented something like, it's an intense 11-week program where you talk about death and other life-changing diagnoses and bad news in the hospital with all kinds of different people and spend all the other time with a cohort of people doing the same thing in the hospital. And you pick apart each other's work and entire life story and put it out on display and see what's wrong with you and what you need to figure out before you help other people and get ordained and do all that great pastor stuff. It's kind of draining. Yeah, something like that. Really glad it's done. It was great. There were a lot of gee, thanks a lot prayers during this summer. Oh, shingles, week 3. Okay, thanks a lot. Wonder how you will lead me through this as I practically cry from pain at 3 in the morning when someone has lost their husband. In CPE, when asked how it went, we have 2 categories of good. There's good and there's CPE good. Like, good is, brownies and Liberace on piano. They're really good. Then there's CPE good, where, dang it, you got what you needed. It's those times when you had no other option than to dive head first into something very scary. Because the only other option was death. In the case of the Israelites, it was not only a physical death, I think it was also a spiritual death. Being enslaved to a Pharaoh whose manipulation and power and prestige oppresses people's way of being, closing the doors of opportunity and shutting out the lights that gives them hope for a freedom that transcends human barriers, theological disagreements, and political interest. One of the things I was most anxious about while beginning my time at the hospital was just that, death. I'd never even seen a dead body before. What would happen when I was called to a room of a grieving family whose loved one had just died? How would I react? Could I keep it together? It gets better, I promise. It's going to get better. just bear with me here. It was week 1, shift 1, 2:32 in the morning. I was fast asleep in the on-call room when I was woken up suddenly by the intercom system. Code blue, ER, triage room 1, ETA 15 minutes. Code blue, ER, triage room 1, ETA 15 minutes. My palms began to sweat. My heart pounded as I raced to put all of my clothes back on and straighten up my badge that said nothing more than Doug Collins, chaplain. Code blue, ER, triage room 1, ETA 15 minutes. I grabbed my pager and notebook and rushed out the door, down the stairs, and across running across what seemed like miles of endless tiles and beeping and the smell of formaldehyde. Running, filling my name tag flat on my chest, remembering what it said, my heart pounding, afraid, nervous. Code blue means heart attack. All I could think was, God, please make it go away. Please don't let this person die. I'm not ready. I don't know what to do. Please. As I rushed through the entry swinging doors, the floor was flooded with medical staff. Social workers, doctors, CNAs, EKG specialists, x-ray technicians, a clinical coordinator, and now me, chaplain, all waiting in silence and in anticipation for the ambulance to arrive. Corners of people's mouths hardened in acknowledging one another as we look at each other, waiting for the emergency to come. I wonder who is waiting for the emergency to come today. Hands are gloved up, a gurney is sanitized and placed under an examining light. They've done this before. Gee, thanks a lot, God. As the sound of the sirens grew from the distance, my heart rate began to increase even more. I felt restless and didn't really know how to carry myself. I had no idea where I would stand or what I would do in the midst of an emergency. If you've ever had a new student intern, I'm sure Ian and Danielle have never done this, but well, you get the new student intern, it's like, hi, Doug, I don't really know how to hold myself. But Ian's she doesn't do that. She's an upstanding young woman. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So I was standing there with this weird, awkward posture, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. Chaplain, please, I just started, I don't do death, so please just don't die. An elderly woman was briskly rolled into the room with an oxygen mask on her face and a tear in her eye. What felt like hundreds of people dressed in aqua-colored scrubs rushed around her to transfer her to the triage room. And here I am, standing in the background, scared to death, with absolutely no idea of why I'm here and what I'm supposed to do. I wonder how the Israelites felt, standing in the wilderness. What's next? The room, although filled with medical professionals, was silent other than the clear, concise medical jargon being traded back and forth between the doctor and the nurse. The rest of us stood around patiently, ready to take orders and assist the team when needed. Silence was broken when a faint voice from the nurse's station yelled, DNR. DNR, she's a DNR. DNR, do not resuscitate. In the event of a medical emergency in which your body shuts down naturally, you have opted out of heroic medical intervention. It means the patient has made peace with their life and is ready to die with nature's course. By this point, my heart is thumping out of the chest, because I know what this means for the chaplain. What happens next, however, is a beautiful thing. As soon as everyone heard the letters D and R, the doctors removed the tube from the woman's mouth. An IV was pulled in, the blood was blotted. A nurse came in and tucked her into a nice warm blanket. And before I knew it, I heard the last rustle of the curtains being closed in that large triage room with the glaring fluorescent lights and the beeping fade in the distance. And it was just me and her. We made eye contact and I sat down to her level on a stool that was nearby. I held her hand and said everything was going to be okay. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what else I was supposed to say. So that's all I said. After 45 minutes of sitting with her in silence and holding her hand, her breaths grew shallower and shallower and farther apart. You've probably heard this cliche before, but it is truly amazing how vastly large amounts of time there can be between breaths in a human's time. Our eyes were locked in on each other, and although she couldn't speak, she was saying everything to me. That tear never dried. She She wheezed and her hand tightened, and as we prayed together, she died. Death. And all of a sudden, people still alive feel something inside that you've never really felt before. It's that strange feeling of loss. It's like that contract has been broken. What do you do? Shock, disbelief. How do you move forward? What will life look like from here on out? Thanks a lot, God. I do, however, have an idea of what death probably meant for her. I think she experienced an exodus from pain, from worry, from fear, and was diving into something that was kind of scary. That unknown brought her what she needed, a new beginning, and the end to a life well lived, and the beginning to something new. I think I experienced an exodus of sorts myself. And in that moment, as my own tears flooded and streams down my cheeks, my grumbles to God were more like pangs of sadness beyond words. I wonder who is in need of that exodus today. As I left the room after blessing her body, the walk back to the on-call room was a long one. I noticed something that I hadn't expected, though. Since we had held hands for almost an hour, my hands became a little clammy. But that was okay. My hand was still a little wet and hot as I left the room and walked past the beeping and the tiles again. And it hit me that even though she died, I could still feel her warmth. Even though she had gone beyond, I could still physically feel a peace that that woman had left for me in my hand. And all of a sudden, it wasn't really death. It was Margaret. Somehow, for that moment, I forgot that I still had a life. And in the urgency of fear and confusion, I journeyed forth where the wild things were in my own path. And somehow, gee, thanks a lot, God, manna fell from the sky. I don't know why. Looks kind of weird. Tastes kind of funny. But I was no longer alone.